Well, hello everybody. This is Krishna Vedula here again from India, representing GEDC, IFES, and IUCE. Welcome again to one of our webinars, one of the most popular webinar series, I think, in the world, actually. Welcome and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are, different parts of the world. It is my pleasure to have this amazing panel in front of me. They're from all over the world. They're from Paris, Scotland, Ghana, South Africa, and I'm located in India. And we've got a couple of people behind the scenes from the United States and other parts of the world. So thank you so much. This is really exciting. We'll be talking some great, interesting things here. And first thing I will do is introduce the person who is going to be the moderator for this panel discussion. The lead person here is Monica Holly Collins. She's a researcher and lecturer at Institute Minds Telecom Business School in near Paris. Currently, there she acts as the deputy director of a research team which focuses on the social engagement and impact of universities, the future of higher education, and university business cooperation and its role in regional innovation. She and her team manage over 10 European Commission funded projects with a total value of over 6 million euros, as well as a strategic partnership in the era of digitization SEED program at IMTBS. Previously, she has worked at two international organizations in Paris, France, the OECD and the UNESCO, as well as working as consultant with Petrus since 2014. So it's a real pleasure to introduce you, Monica, and just hand over the mic to you now. Take it over. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Very happy to be here today, everyone, for the fourth webinar in our GEDC Industry Forum webinar series. Today's topic, as you know, is societal impact. The previous three have been on skills and talent, educational transformation, and discovery and innovation. Very happy to be speaking about societal impact today with our panelists. We're going to start off today just with some brief introductions from our panelists. We have Dr. Thokozani Majozi, the Dean of Engineering at Wits University, Chair of the South Africa Engineering Deans Forum, Kozo Korkotsi, Foundation Manager at Shared Interest Foundation, and Drew McFarlane, Rankings Manager QS, leading the development of the QS World Rankings on sustainability. So I will ask each of our panelists just to give a brief introduction of themselves and their interest in today's topic. Let's start with you, Toko.
Yes, thank you very much, Monica. My name is Thokozani Majozi. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and the Built Environment at Wits University in South Africa. I'm also a professor of chemical and metallurgical engineering in the same university. So that's basically who I am. I've been working a lot on matters of sustainability. My area of expertise is process systems engineering, where we looked at sustainable design of chemical operations in particular.
Thank you very much. What about you, Kozo? Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. My name is Kojo Kokochi. I am based in Accra, Ghana, in the West African region. And I am the Foundation Manager at Shared Interest Foundation. And I'm responsible for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, as well as the lead for the social accounting process at Shared Interest. So Shared Interest Foundation is an international development charity located in the northeast of England. And our Shared Interest Foundation will develop and deliver technical assistance programs to support smallholder producer groups to build strong, resilient, and sustainable businesses. So over the past few years, we have been working with universities in Africa and Latin America to develop climate smart and eco-friendly technologies aimed at addressing some critical societal challenges and issues that are facing smallholder producers. So we currently have projects in 7 countries, 5 in Africa and 2 in Latin America. So I am happy to be here to contribute to the discussion on societal impacts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Happy to have you here. And Drew, please tell us more about yourself.
Thanks, Monica. Hi, everyone. My name is Drew McFarlane. So I'm the rankings manager at QS. I think QS is the sort of largest higher education insights company in the world. We're famous or infamous for our rankings. My background, I'm a social scientist by training, so I'm among an unfamiliar audience today with all of you engineers. I was a psychologist by training, and I lectured for a few years before joining QS. And I think why I'm here today, most recently I was part of the design team for our sustainability ranking, which we just launched this month. Thanks.
Thank you, Drew. So again, thank you all for being here. Our topic today, as I mentioned, is societal impact. Given the global challenges that we're facing today, it's increasingly important that we are educating future engineers to be able to tackle these challenges. Employers are increasingly interested as well in hiring graduates with sustainability skills, for example, in the workplace. And students are showing a growing interest in the topic. I recently came across some statistics on this from a global survey carried out in 2020 by the Students Organizing for Sustainability International. 92% of respondents globally, so these are young people, teenagers to early 20s, I believe, and 92% of the respondents agreed that sustainable development should be universally taught and promoted by colleges and universities. 85% agreed that they would like to learn more about sustainable development, and 73% agreed that it should be actively incorporated into and promoted by all courses. So just to give a little perspective about what we're dealing with today. But it is still quite a broad topic, so I'd like to help narrow it down so we can focus on a few of the different aspects that I mentioned today. I would first like to ask you, Toko, what does societal impact for university look like from your perspective?
Well, it takes a number of dimensions. There is a societal impact that would look at the curriculum reform, for example, where we look at how we prepare our undergrads and graduate students before they finish varsity, so that by the time they go to their societies, they are well equipped with their knowledge to contribute immediately. So there is that part which talks to the knowledge that we give to students at university. But there is another part that says, how do we as academics interact directly with the societies that we seek to serve in solving some of their problems? And particularly with us, given where I am in South Africa is one of the driest countries in the world. So water in particular has come up as one of those very, very key areas of engagement with our societies, both in terms of conserving water, but also making sure that we provide clean water in one way or another. And of course, water and energy go together. Is always that nexus. So it's always a two-pronged approach. The first one is saying, how do we make sure that our students are well equipped with tools once they're at university, and then making sure that we go directly to the societies that we serve as a university in solving some of their direct problems pertinent to sustainability.
Great, thank you. So there's a bit of an echo when you speak, but just to recap for everyone to make sure that we've all understood you correctly. You're saying that essentially it's a two-pronged approach for you. So you want to equip students for tackling societal issues when they graduate, but also academics and the university itself can go directly, can work directly with society on these issues. Is that more? That's really interesting. So I think it would be useful to give the audience some concrete examples of what this might look like. So I'm going to ask you again, Toko, and also Kodzo, if you could begin. Could you give us any concrete examples of what this might look like? So student involvement in societal issues, or institutional involvement or academic involvement. And Kodzo, we'll start with you. Thank you.
But a typical example of talking directly to undergraduate students, is changing the curriculum or modifying the curriculum such that we enrich it with some of sustainability topics. One of them being water, and of course the other one, very foremost, being energy. So we introduced this in an undergraduate program. These programs, by the way, are accredited fully by some of our accreditation bodies. And we also have projects whilst the student is at an undergraduate level where they work with some of the communities in our vicinity within the project. And that project, of course, earns the students some marks as part of their curriculum development. So that's one example. In another example, some of our prototypes developed in-house, like a membrane filtration systems, for example, we take to communities where we work with them directly in solving some of their water issues, for example, cleaning their groundwater and making sure that that water is ready for consumption. So these are some of the typical examples on the issues of sustainability.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we can hear you much better now. Thank you. And Kojo, would you be able to give us some concrete examples as well?
Yeah, thank you, Monica. I want to give two quick examples, one in Peru and one in Ghana. So starting with the example from Peru, we work with the National University Toribio Rodriguez de Mendoza to develop a biological method for controlling pests and diseases in coffee. In the northern jungle of Peru, it's actually the home for many coffee producers. In 2020, the region has known a high incidence of coffee borer disease, which is a pest that will attack 50 to 100% of commercial coffee production. So you will understand that when they lose their coffee, they lose their income, then it impacts directly their livelihood. So together with the university, we thought of working together to create an environmentally friendly and eco-friendly method for controlling the pests so that we can improve coffee production and improve the income of the people living in that region. So we first of all worked together to develop fungicide, which was based on a fungi known as Bovaria baciana. So this fungi was developed in laboratory and propagated, and it is a very environmental friendly method for controlling the coffee borer disease. So coffee farmers normally resorted to the use of agrochemicals, which threaten biodiversity conservation, impoverish the soil, and even undermine organic coffee production. But looking at the environment, we developed together with the university this method for controlling the coffee borer disease. And in 2021, the income of many producers has improved because yield has gone up, and we have also contributed to the conservation of the environment. So that was one example of working with the university to develop technologies that will support people living in community to address the critical issues that are facing or confronting them. Another one was in Ghana, where we work with the crop science department of University of Ghana to develop a technology known as hydroponics. This came from an observation that we made that in the northern part of Ghana, access to land is a big problem. Climate change remains a bigger challenge for people. Meanwhile, agriculture is the mainstay of the people living in that region. So they are unable to grow crops, but they needed really to have those crops produced in order to respond to their basic needs in terms of feeding. So we developed a technology that we call soilless farming or hydroponics, which enabled the farmer to use locally available materials to grow their crops outside the soil. And this actually technology requires a small land space, so addresses the issue of access to land, which is a problem in the community. And secondly, it requires small amount of water, and you could produce all types of crops all year round, irrespective of the climate situation. So the development of that technology was based on a need assessment at the society or at the community level. So we understood what the problem was and how do we address it to improve the livelihood of the people in that community. So with this technology that we have developed, many people in the country have embraced it and are able to grow crops all year round, and they are now addressing the problem of food security in the region. So this is another example of our work with the universities to improve societal impact in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you both for those very interesting and relevant examples, and I hope that helped the audience understand a bit more what we're addressing with the topic of societal impact. As I mentioned, it can be quite broad. Drew, I'd like to bring you in here because you are involved in the new sustainability ranking that QS has developed. Would you speak a bit about that and how it relates to the examples that we've just heard?
Sure. Before that, I think I would just make the point that rankings, whether you like them or not, have had demonstrable impact on higher education. So I'm going to think back to when I was a child. I'm sure my parents wanted me to do well in exams for the exam's sake. I wanted to do well in the exams to get presents. And if there's people in the audience today who have kids, they might relate to this bribery. So QS give ranks. Any rankings agency give ranks to people. Those are presents for hard work. And what we saw 20 years ago was lots of institutions, particularly in developing parts of the world, with very poor research footprints, very poor rates of internationalization, poor rates of sort of reputation and collaboration. And when we put those front and center in our ranking and said, if you would like to be ranked, you will need to demonstrate performance in these areas. Over the last 20 years, we've seen massive improvements from countries like Malaysia, China, Eastern Europe's come up quite a bit as well. And of course, they probably would have done that naturally over time, but rankings has certainly helped light a fire under institutions to do that. So bringing that to sustainability, we want to try and have a similar impact on institutions in sustainability as we've had with things like research impact, reputation, and collaboration. So we brought the ranking to market this year, and it's a decidedly outwards focused ranking. So if you think of the missions of a university, research, teaching, and engagement, we thought, how can those missions translate into making a difference to the world in the environmental sustainable development goals of the UN's 17 SDGs and the social sustainable development goals of those UN SDGs? So we're looking at, for example, are you equipping students with the relevant curriculum and skills to go out into the world? And Toko made that point in his first example, making sure that we're equipping students to be not just equipped, but actually to lead the conversation in sustainable development. So we'll be rewarding universities for having relevant curriculum. We're also looking at their performance in certain subjects that are very aligned with sustainable concerns. So earth and environmental sciences, earth and marine sciences, looking whether they've got climate master's programs, green energy programs, to make sure that the quality of that education is good. And we can also track that from research metrics as well. If there's great citation impact from these subjects, and I think engineering is actually a fantastic example. Across the SDGs that the UN are tracking, many of them would be solved by engineers. I think no doubt about it. So the research impact of that. We're also looking at research collaborations between Global North and Global South, and that's where we might be particularly interesting for this audience. I think you'll all know that it's been a struggle for Africa to get a strong research footprint when you compare it to other regions of the world. So what we've decided to look at is if institutions in the Global South, indeed much of Africa, are managing to have fruitful research collaborations with institutions in the Global North, that's sort of fantastic for bringing up academic standards, bringing the sort of skills, the knowledge, and the facilities from those more developed institutions and sharing them with the institutions in the African region so that they can, do all these fantastic programs like the ones Kodzo was talking about. But that's only really going to happen with cross-border research collaborations and sharing. So that's a big part of the ranking as well.
Mm. Thank you, Drew. Kaja, I'd like to ask you, so in your role, you mentioned that you do some kind of assessment yourself in your role. How do you go about that, and are there any commonalities with anything that Drew just discussed?
Yeah, thank you once again. Yes. In fact, impact evaluation needs to be aligned to certain key criteria. So generally, in evaluating impacts, we look at the effectiveness of the intervention or the technology. So this should be part of the design of the technology and the learning process, even for engineering. When you are developing a technology, there are key questions that you need to ask yourself. In the first place, how effective it is? That is it able to achieve the objective? Because a technology is developed to achieve an objective. So after developing the technology, is the objective that was outlined achieved? How efficient is the technology? How cost effective is it? And how affordable it is to the users of that technology is also a criteria to be taken into consideration. Because these things come to the fore when it comes to the evaluation of that technology and how it impacts society. We also look at relevance of the technology. Is it the technology doing the right thing? What is actually best to do? And what difference is the technology making? So that is the relevance. Then we look at the impacts. What difference is that technology making on society? Then we look at coherence. Is the technology really a good fit? Does it really respond to the needs of the people? Does it really address the critical problem that were identified before the conceptualization of that technology? And finally, the issue of sustainability. How sustainable is that technology? How sustainable will the benefit of that technology be? So when you go to the field to do an impact evaluation or look at evaluation of the impact you have produced, these are the criteria that normally we use. So we look at the intervention, the discovery, the innovation, and then we go ahead to ask these critical questions to see whether those areas have been fully covered by the technology and has it really created the impacts that we wanted. So there are a number of interventions that we have implemented in some countries. So we go to the field. Yes, of course, we sat down and then you have access to this technology, but you realize that technology is not really environmentally sustainable, or it doesn't really address the intended need of the people because it wasn't part of the conceptualization or the design of the technology itself. So when it happens that way, then you realize that, yes, of course, a lot of time, resources, energy have gone into the learning process, the design process, and at the end of the day, it becomes a failure on the ground. That is why it is critical that these criteria are addressed during the training of engineers and innovators so that they are taken into account, because when it comes to evaluation, these are the same criteria that we are going to use to ascertain whether it's been effective, impactful, sustainable, relevant, or coherent. Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. So you're speaking about the evaluation of the particular programs that you're working with in collaboration with universities, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
How do you choose the universities that you work with? Is there some kind of metric that you look at, or for example, would a ranking such as the sustainability ranking that Drew is a part of be helpful in choosing the universities that you collaborate with?
Yeah, in choosing the university that we collaborate with, first of all, we look at the understanding and the program of that university in relation to the type of technology we really want to develop or implement to help people in communities. So if a university has really marketed itself of having skills in a specific area that is of interest to our program intervention, then we feel it's a good fit for us. So we develop a kind of partnership with that university so that we can explore and see how they could support our programs. And we also encourage using local universities because they also live in the local community, understand the needs of the people, and already have some level of engagement with the people in that community. So the local knowledge is also very important in designing technologies and interventions. So we do take that also into account. And also we look at the willingness or some past performance of the university in certain areas and see whether it aligns very well with our mission and vision. Then we begin to develop that level of partnerships.
Thank you. Toko, I'd like to ask you now, we've begun talking about how universities are chosen for different collaborations. I was wondering what you think about, what your opinion is on the importance in terms of visibility and impact of rankings or different assessments, and how that might be useful in choosing universities to collaborate with on these social impact projects.
Yes, thanks, Monica. The rankings for sustainability in particular, and many other rankings that we have, are very, very, very important. One of the reasons why that is important, students, when they decide in most instances which universities they go for, they tend to look at these rankings very carefully. So the rankings are very important. And I think it's very much along the lines of what Drew said. Whether you like it or not, the rankings are important. It's an issue that we've debated at length as to which of the rankings do we go for. Are the sustainability rankings necessary for us? And there's a resonating position that the sustainability rankings in particular are very, very important. WITS, as you would know, my university ranks very, very highly. And I think in Africa, perhaps we could be the highest in that regard. We took a decision to subscribe to sustainability rankings, and we work a lot on sustainability issues. I would have said perhaps, or maybe mentioned at some point to you, Monica, that we are arguably the only university, at least in South Africa, which has a pro vice chancellor that looks at climate, inequality, and sustainability. Just to pronounce our interest and dedication or focus on issues of climate, on issues of sustainability. So for us, rankings are very important to attract students. But besides that, rankings tell us that we are hitting hard where it matters most. So basically, they give us an indication of where we sit in the broader scheme of SDG goals, for example. So where do we sit in that scheme? And how are we doing in that regard so that we can, of course, monitor our performance as we go forward. We also use these rankings also to look for partners, not just in Africa, but also outside Africa, because we know there are many, many colleagues or many institutions, both academia and private, that work in these areas, including the Research Council. So we use these rankings to look at who out there is working in these areas, who is doing well in these areas, and then who to collaborate with along the lines, of course, of complementarity of skill or synergies. So the rankings are very, very important for us.
Thank you. Drew, I see you nodding a lot. Would you like to make any comments on what Toko has just said?
Well, yeah, I think there's a couple of points that was interesting. One, the importance to students. I think with Gen Z now, I guess kids in their sort of early teens to early 20s, something like that. That generation are so well known around the world for being the activist generation. They protest brands where brands are seen to not be socially conscious. They protest if there's environmental issues that big brands, oil companies or things are not taking seriously. But actually on university campuses, we're seeing that as well. I know of a very local example where students boycotted an entire course because the instructor demanded in-paper assessments And the student says, no, we're not going to print this out. It's completely ridiculous. We'll email you the assessment. And there's this real battle between old ways of working and new ways of working. So these Gen Z students are the ones going to the world's universities right now. So they're going expecting universities to be making a difference. And if rankings agencies are showing the performance, I think they're going to be taking that quite seriously. It was also really just encouraging to hear Toko talk about using rankings to sort of help make partnerships. You know, not every university can be Harvard with billions of dollars of an endowment and can do everything in-house. A lot of universities, maybe most around the world, have to collaborate. They have to share facilities, share expertise in research. And if rankings is one way of helping them to do that and strategize, fantastic.
Great, thank you, Drew. I'm going to pivot a little bit here because something that has been mentioned a couple of times now is sustainability skills and developing those in students. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and how specifically curriculum can be developed to help really, you know, develop these skills in students and then send them out as graduates where they're able to make an impact in society. And I'd also like to hear how that might come into the rankings that you've developed, Drew. But first I'll ask Toko, because I know we've spoken a bit about it before, but in your opinion, what kinds of curriculum does your university implement to develop these kinds of sustainability skills?
Yes, indeed. Monica, the best way of inculcating this kind of knowledge is through projects. So it is very much project-based in most instances, where we have a living, say, from industry or from the communities that we serve. It's a living example. For example, here we have textile industries. We work with the textile industries. We work with the pulp and paper industries. We also work with some of the food and beverage industries. These are water and energy intensive industries. So they are the ones who would, for example, give a problem to us, which is then given to a student. So a professor works with the student, mainly undergraduate students, and that way they learn by actually doing how to reduce reduce water in this instance or reduce energy. But it also, as they do so, this inculcates the thinking at a very, very early of taking sustainability issues into account. Now, when we ask our students to say, design a plant, I'm talking about chemical engineers, for example, because we've got a number of capstone projects in our final year. One of the assessment criteria is how well they took sustainability measures into account. So when you design a plant from scratch, to what extent does it reduce the amount of water that it uses? To what extent does it reduce its energy footprint? And we assess students based on that. So at a very early stage, they understand that it must be very much an inherent part of their thinking in everything that they do, that they reduce conserve our resources. So this is the best way of doing it so far. And we've found that to be working very well because we do get feedback from our industrial partners where these students are employed, who give us very good feedback in that regard, that when they get into industry, they tend to hit the ground running in as far as that is concerned.
Great, thank you so much. Really interesting. So, and Kajo, based in your experience working with universities on these different projects, you work with student teams as well, correct?
Yeah, so when we develop projects, there are students that come from internship. So they have practical hands-on what they do. So it's been very helpful. So there have been a collaboration between our projects and also universities. So they do send their students to come and see the actual demonstration of what we are doing on the ground. So it's also an opportunity for them to do research and also ask questions, which at the end of the day help them in their research work or when they are writing their proposal. So there have been that collaboration between some of our projects and student bodies.
Mm-hmm. And what has your experience been working with some of these? So you're working with these students as interns. Have you had the opportunity to work with them after they've finished these projects with you? And have you noticed a difference between graduates who have worked on these projects and graduates who these kinds of projects and graduates who haven't, in terms of the skills needed for these social impact projects?
Monica, you broke a bit. Can you reword the question again, please?
Apologies. So I was just curious. So you said that you work with students mainly as interns and in these ways, like these kinds of ways in the projects that you work on. I was wondering if I assume that you've gotten to work with some of them after they've graduated, and I'm curious if you've noticed a difference in the way that these students approach societal impact and sustainability versus maybe graduates who haven't worked on these kinds of projects.
Yeah, to be honest, we haven't really followed them probably after graduation to see how they are approaching impact or how they do tackle societal problems, really. Maybe this is an area that we also need to look at critically going forward, probably for us to be looking at students who have had internship on our project, how after graduation, where do they find themselves, how are they approaching development issues, and what contribution are they making to society might also be an interesting area to look at maybe going forward.
Definitely. And that leads me to you, Drew. So speaking about these sustainability skills, are these incorporated in your ranking? And if so, how?
Well, it's interesting. We almost have this sort of opposite challenge to Kodzo there, who, we don't track what's happening live at universities. It's very difficult. We sort of infer performance from much later outcomes. So to give a few examples, one of the things we look at in the sustainability ranking is people who've made it onto successful alumni lists, climate activist lists, social change makers, green entrepreneurs. That's the end result. And then we infer from that if they got onto these successful lists, the university must have did a pretty good job in instilling skills and knowledge into them. And we do the same for lots of other things. We look at citations. That's the outcome of research that was done years ago. I think, yeah, it will be a challenge for us in rankings, but a challenge we should take up of actually looking at what's happening on the ground now. It's a huge resource effort to do that, though. A university tells us that they're embedding sustainability into the curriculum. Do we have to read the curriculum? Are we going to go through their course materials and sort of vet that and score it? You do that for one university, sure. Do that for 3,000. That's another issue entirely. So there's a lot of having to take things at face value, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting one for us. So we do ask universities, do you have curriculum on this? Do you have research centers on this? Is it embedded? I think embedding is really, really important. When I was at university and studied linguistics, that's all I studied. They didn't teach me anything about sustainability or about business skills or anything. So embedding is important. But how do we prove that universities are doing that? That's a challenge.
Indeed. So speaking of, I think we've established that that rankings do have an impact and are important for students and for universities when they're looking for different partners, as Toko mentioned. I'm wondering, so the examples that we've had today, several of them from Africa, are both for two of our panelists are based in Africa, and I'm wondering, so in the rankings, it's often there is a focus on certain geographical areas, and I'm wondering how might universities in Africa, for example, who are doing really important work on sustainability, how might they be more, get more involved in your ranking, Drew? Toko mentioned, for example, that they have a pro-vice chancellor on climate. Would that be something that would be flagged in your ranking? And essentially, what can these universities do who may not show up in their rankings, even though that they do have a lot of these kinds of projects? What can they do to increase visibility?
Yeah, a good and challenging question for those universities. There's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So it's not that rankings focus in any particular region. We focus on things that we've deemed to be important to higher education, research being a huge one of them. So regions that naturally do well in research end up being regions well represented in rankings, but nobody sets out to rank a majority of North American or European institutions. They just happen to do a lot more and more impactful research. The sustainability ranking, as I mentioned earlier, we wanted to take a very decidedly outwards focus. So if the university is really helping to change the world socially or environmentally, that should be visible, pretty obvious to anybody who wants to look visible globally in your alumni, in your research, in your reputation. So I don't think I'm going to lie or sugarcoat it. It would be a challenge for a smaller university doing more niche work, more community-based work to get into a ranking like that. But there are so many other avenues for those institutions to shine, whether through national accreditation systems, through a rating system, possibly a little bit further down the road, once we get a little bit more expert ourselves in this area, we might start to do branched rankings that, we have regional rankings at QS, at Asia ranking and Arab ranking. Perhaps we start to do sub-rankings of sustainability that focus more on those community engagement things or those learning and teaching objectives. But at the moment, it is decidedly a sort of global impact flavored ranking with research at the heart of it. So without a strong research footprint, it's going to be a challenge. So start with research and, hire the best faculty you can. Make sure you're driving a strong research agenda at your university. Collaborate, boost your citations. That's my practical advice, but none of that's easy.
Indeed, thank you. Following up on the collaborate, the emphasis on collaboration, which I'm sure we all agree is important. I'd like to focus now on a specific type of collaboration, and that is with employers and the community. So Toko, I'd first like to ask you, what's been your experience working with industry, employers more broadly, and on this particular issue, sustainability and social impact more broadly?
Yes, the experience has been very, very positive because it is usually premised on mutual benefits. So there is a lot that university gains out of this, mainly through funding, but that's not really the driver behind this. But the knowledge that is generated by the universities is of direct use by industries. So there is that mutual benefit. In my opinion, that is at the heart of the success that we've had, having a mutually beneficial kind of a relationship where the knowledge that we generate at a university actually has immediate and observable outcomes in industry. So the industries then become our laboratory of some kind in real life. But as I said, it's not just the industry, we also go directly to our societies. Our thinking is we've gone beyond what you would call in the past the tri-helix era, where it was industry, government, and academia. We also have to include in that society. So we have an avenue to go directly to industries, work with industries, and of course, those industries indirectly impact society, but we also go directly to societies and measure this. But I've found that these relationships tend to work best where all parties involved benefit.
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. And Kodzo, in your experience, what has been, how what's your view on the importance of collaboration between the universities that you've worked with and the local industry and employers more broadly?
Yeah, what I will say is that collaboration between universities, society, and industry is actually fundamental to the training and growth of students, as well as in the development of curriculum that will really fit the needs of society. So we are training people who will be able to function effectively in society. So I just feel that it is important that in the design even of our curriculum in the first place, need to even start from society, because curriculum must be need-based, because such a curriculum is training people who should be functional within the society. And it is there that we can talk really about impact. And these people who are, after graduation, these students who go to the industry are working to promote the cause of society in the first place. They are working to advance women development. So this collaboration needs to be strengthened right from the development of the curriculum through the teaching pedagogy and down to the impact assessment. That would be
I hate to interrupt. I think we need to get to the audience for a few questions. I think
yes,
Kristen has questions from the audience. Kristen, you want to read them out? Or?
I've got one from Neil that I'll begin with, who asks, on the rankings issue, how might universities that are greenwashing be separated from those that are genuinely making a difference? And I'll start with you, Drew, on that one.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, it's an obvious problem that we're aware of. Companies are doing it all around the world, greenwashing, and certainly universities are going to do it too. One thing I would note is, our ranking is not just environmental focus. 50% of it is on those social SDGs, gender equality, equal opportunities, peace, justice, and opportunities. A part of it, like any ranking, is hoping that universities are truthful. They're not always truthful. We try our best to validate their data. We use independent sources to verify it. We use government databases to try and verify data. But a lot of this data is very frontier stuff. Universities have just started recording their ESG emissions. Companies have been doing it for years, and accounting standards agencies have very rigorous definitions of what they will allow for things like Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. Should be familiar to the engineers in the room. Universities don't have a regulatory body globally, so I would just say my short answer to that is it's a concern. We're not quite sure how to deal with that yet.
Great, yes, understandably. I would like to ask one more question of the audience, an audience member, Elsie. She says, it's a truism that what matters to a society is what measures, metrics, and rankings tell that tale. To the extent that society is coming to appreciate the unintended consequences of siloed sustainability impacts on systemic well-being, e.g. on the living system, on environmental justice, on equitable health outcomes, for example, to what extent is whole system mindset a priority for academia and for the design of metrics and rankings? And I know, Toko, this was an interest of yours, so perhaps I'll let you answer that question.
Indeed, yeah, I like the question actually, because fundamental in the adoption of these sustainability rankings, at least for us, it was really talking to our adopted position as an institution that we break the silos completely across various disciplines, humanities, science, engineering, and there is no avenue, no better avenue at this stage that we've identified than sustainability issues. But also you can add to that things like AI or fourth industrial revolution. But in as far as this discussion is concerned, sustainability came up very strongly as an avenue for breaking the silos. So at the heart of what we are doing is really that of having all disciplines on the same wavelength.
Okay, just one final question from the audience. And just very briefly, Drew, how can this community, our audience members, how can this community help them improve their approach to be as relevant and inclusive as possible?
How can this community improve their approach to be as what, sorry, as inclusive as possible?
So how can the community, so the audience members, how can they improve their approach to be as relevant and inclusive as possible, given your experience at QS and in these rankings?
Sure, I would follow what Toko said. Don't silo things. Don't silo your engineering curriculums away from a lot of the broader societal concerns. And then I would say, engage with rankings agencies. Of course, I'm going to say that, but we want to learn from experts, such as this kind of audience. There's lots of things we're learning as we go along with respect to like how to measure emissions and what sort of standards and accreditations exist out there that we might want to lean on to improve our work. So you can, by helping us to improve our work, we'll help back into that conversation. I don't think I've got any more really. I don't think it's for rankings companies to tell engineers how to improve their
and just as a last thing here to wrap up, same question, but to you, Drew, QS. How can QS then improve their approach to be as relevant and inclusive as possible?
Yeah, I guess overlap a bit with my previous answer is by learning from lots of different industry experts, and we have done that. We've got an independent advisory board. There's 50 different academics from a variety of fields, but we need more than that. They're not sustainability experts. So we need to be engaging a lot more with forums like this, listening. We're already getting a lot of feedback on the ranking, some of it great, some of it not so great, of course, learning from that. And I think some of the points raised about making sure we're not neglecting the community engagement side of the work and making sure we're tracking real-time progress is something we're going to have to go away and think about a bit more, not just always tracking outcomes. That's what I would like to see us do anyway. Yes,
and that definitely checks out with what Kadzo has said as well. And Toko, thank you to all of our panelists. Excuse me. This was a very interesting discussion, and thank you to our audience members for your questions. I will now turn it over to Krishna and Hans.
Followed the instructions. I muted myself. Okay, thank you so much for such a fascinating, enlightening discussion. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to invite Hans now to join us and say a few words. Hans, come on in.
Okay, thank you very much. I was muted. Thank you, kindly, Krishna. Monica, thank you very much for your very thoughtful and creative questioning of our three colleagues and guests. I personally hope to have the opportunity to get to know all three of them. And thank you, gentlemen, very much for joining us and the diversity of perspectives. It's very interesting. I think this particular discussion is very much relevant to our forthcoming global conference that we will be starting November 28th, hosting. I have the honor to co-chair it with some outstanding leaders, particularly in South Africa, and we'll be in Cape Town. And one of the key things talking about sustainability and the linkage of students that was said is key. Increasingly, our engineering students are participating in our global conferences. And particularly this time, we're working very diligently with not only colleagues in Europe and North America, but very deeply with African colleagues that are, so we are facilitating opportunities for African students to interchange, to connect and build relationships with students outside of Africa, and a mutually win-win opportunities for building hopefully permanent relationship for the years beyond. So I'm very, very excited to just share that with you. Obviously, many of the key theme that is touched on this particular conversation involves deans and faculty member and others and our corporate colleagues. And so I see this experience here this morning, this afternoon for you as a wonderful passage in terms of our experience. The other final thing I simply want to say, I'm looking forward obviously to see, and the numbers are looking very, very excellent. We will also have continuing discussions among many of the issues, including mental health issues and all that are impacting our global community, is also bringing together women leaders as part of the series of Rising to the Top that we have published several books and many of incredible, outstanding leaders, women leaders that will be participating there. Without going into further details on this, I'm very excited that this particular experience this morning will be continued at a broader level, even in the next 10 days in Cape Town. I look forward to see many of you. Thank you kindly, Krishna, and thank you, and peace be with all of you.
All right, thank you. I guess all good things have to come to an end. And thank you, Chair, for this session. Monica, extremely fantastic job. Thank you, Kodso. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Toko. Really appreciate this global audience enlightening us about the future of how we should impact society through our education institutions and have a system that actually provides rankings for what we do. So thank you so much, and happy happy day. Everybody be happy, be peaceful, and be healthy. Okay. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
Bye-bye.
Nice to speak to you all. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.